Eskinder Nega is a journalist. He was born in Ethiopia, but grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, graduating from American University. He is a husband and a father. He's 44 years old. Plenty of journalists have fled Ethiopia in the last 20 years. Though the African country is a Western ally, its government has been criticized for having some of the harshest restrictions of freedom of the press anywhere in the world. Publications have been shut down, journalists have been exiled or imprisoned, but Eskinder returned to Ethiopia and stayed. He dreamed of a fairer, more open society, and he insisted on telling the truth, no matter the consequences for him or his family. In 2005, he and his wife criticized an election that they and many independent observers believed had been rigged, so that the longtime ruling party, the EPRDF, could remain in power. Both of them were thrown in jail for treason. When he was released, Eskinder went right back to saying and writing things that would almost certainly send him right back to prison. He criticized Ethiopia's anti-terrorism proclamation, a sweeping law that equated reporting on the opposition with support for terrorism. This sounds like a sick joke, but it's true. His criticism of the anti-terrorism proclamation got him arrested for violating the anti-terrorism proclamation. His captors would have you believe that Eskinder is a terrorist, a man trying to incite violent revolution. This is the man who, during the Arab Spring, wrote these words about the young leaders who pushed for political change in Egypt and Tunisia. Their moral fortitude, exemplified through their nonviolence, is galvanizing not only their peoples, but the world to their cause. This is a man who has refused to grow bitter despite his ordeals. Eskinder's arrest last year drew worldwide condemnation from organizations that support free expression and civil rights. In May, PEN honored him with its 2012 PEN Barbara Goldsmith Freedom to Write Award. Nevertheless, in July, in the face of global protest, Eskinder was sentenced to 18 years in prison. He remains in jail tonight. Tonight, we'll hear one of the columns that he wrote in defiance of his government, his account of meeting Debebe Eshetu, an Ethiopian actor in his 60s, when both were in jail in 2005. Eskinder was motivated to write the story last fall because Debebe had just been arrested again on the same kinds of political charges as last time. Eskinder posted it to the internet just in time for Ethiopian New Year, which in their calendar marked the beginning of the year 2004. It's one of the last stories he wrote before his arrest a few days later. To read this brave piece of journalism, we are honored to have with us tonight a journalism legend. In the summer of 1972, two young reporters for the Washington Post started digging into the story of a break-in at Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. Carl Bernstein and his colleague Bob Woodward would spend the next 2 years producing some of the most important stories in the history of American journalism. Their coverage helped to reveal a web of lies and official corruption that went all the way to the Oval Office. In August 1974, President Nixon resigned in disgrace. Woodward and Bernstein shared a Pulitzer Prize for their work and co-authored the classic book, All the President's Men. Today, Carl Bernstein is a contributing editor at Vanity Fair and frequent contributor to other papers and magazines. His most recent book is A Woman in Charge, The Life of Hillary Rodham Clinton. Last year, he joined us at the Public Forum to share his views on the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the Public Forum, Carl Bernstein.
Thank you, Liev. Let me begin by saying that no honor could be greater than to read Eskinder Nega's words. He's more than a symbol. He's the embodiment of the greatness of truth, of writing and reporting real truth, of persisting in truth, and resisting the oppression of untruth. Even when that oppression carries with it imprisonment and torture, and worst of all, the attempt to silence and to intimidate others into silence. That's what despots and tyrants all over the world have turned to increasingly in the past decade, imprisoning writers and journalists as an example. In Ethiopia, in Turkey, a supposed democracy with more imprisoned journalists, 60-some, than any country in the world, in Russia, in Belarus, in China, in Burma, in Indonesia, Brazil, Kazakhstan, Liberia. Just go around a map of the world and see where we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of writers and journalists in prison today as an example to others who would resist tyranny and oppression. That's why we're here tonight, to raise our voices, cosseted in the comfort of our Constitution and free speech and our First Amendment, in support of our brothers and sisters who have persevered with a kind of bravery and eloquence and persistence that we can only marvel at. So let us marvel at and celebrate Eskinder Nega, for whom among us could write what I'm about to read, spirit unbowed, faith in freedom and the power of the word untrammeled. Debebe Eshato's Arrest and the New Year by Eskinder Nega. Researchers detail 10 types of smile. There's the tight-lipped smile, which the English particularly fancy. There's the twisted smile and the angered. There's the dealer smile of the sly. There's the nothing I can do smile of defeat, and on it goes. Most people could muster a reasonable facsimile of most types of smile. Who, after all, does not occasionally flash a not understanding you smile? But one, the heartfelt smile, defies feigning. It really has to come from the heart. I didn't need to be told that Debebe Eshatu, our co-defendant in the treason trial, was smiling from the heart when he approached me after a visit to the police hospital in 2005. Every muscle on his face was convulsed. What I did not suspect was the staggering news he had for me. Baby Eskinder is on the way. He exclaimed it, smiling brilliantly. It was the smile that dominated the face, an expression of wholesome delight. And before I could recover from the shock, I too was overwhelmed with his joy. And so I learned for the first time in prison, facing treason and genocide charges, that I was to become a father. Debebe's infectious smile sustained prisoners' spirit in those difficult times. Of all the prisoners, his easy smile, authentic and warm, gave us reason to hope against hope. He somehow made the prospect of long prison sentences bearable. There was no gloom where Debebe tread, and naturally, prisoners clamored for his company. His physical health could have been better when I met him last, but his spirit was as lively as ever. We mused about the treason trial, lamented the wasted years since, but parted with a note of optimism about our future. There was absolutely nothing to indicate a changed perspective. The commitment to nonviolence was intact as ever. Much has been said about the improbability of journalists as plausible terror suspects, but Debebe's case is really a class unto itself. This is a frail man in his mid-60s, long plagued by chronic back pain, a free man only under a conditional pardon, a prominent dissident who knows he's under close police scrutiny, and a committed family man whose wife and daughters dote on him. How in the world could such a person be involved in terrorism? It simply defies logic. Even if it is not known to the EPRDF, there is such a thing as a worldwide profile of a terrorist. That person is usually male, probably in his 20s, unmarried, and always a fanatic. Zeal and terrorism go hand in hand. Minus the fanaticism, the terrorist is not a possibility. None of the recent detainees under the terrorism charges remotely resemble this profile. Debebe is probably the ultimate antithesis of the fanatic. His pragmatism and his easy nature define him. Neither do journalist Webst and Radot and opposition politician Zerahim Gebre. They don't fit the profile either. The same goes for the calm university professor, Bekele Gerba. And of course, the list could go on. Why are Ethiopia's alleged terrorist suspects so unique? The answer is too obvious to merit detailing here. I would rather reflect on what Ethiopian New Year 2004, only 2 days into the future, bodes for the nation. Look at what happened to the world in 2003, and it's easy to complain about the things we do not have. No freedom, raging inflation, rising unemployment, rampant corruption, a delusionary ruling party, an uncertain year ahead of us, and the list could go on. But consider the exciting prospects. 2004 could be the year when we too, like the majority of our fellow Africans, will have a government by the people, for the people. 2004 could be the year when we will finally stop killing each other for political reasons. 2004 could be the year when there'll be no more torture in our prisons. 2004 could be the year when Ethiopians will no longer be incarcerated for their political convictions. 2004 could be the year when Ethiopians will no longer have reasons to flee into exile. 2004 could be the year when freedom of expression and association will be respected. 2004 could be the year when we could take justice for granted, and again, the list could go on. The gist of the matter is that there are ample reasons for hope. Tyranny is in retreat everywhere. It has lost one of its last two great bastions, the Arab world. The momentum is now on the side of freedom. Freedom is partial to no race. Freedom has no religion. Freedom favors no ethnicity. Freedom discriminates not between rich and poor countries. Inevitably, freedom will overwhelm Ethiopia. And with the advent of a new year, we are one step closer to freedom. It's wonderful to be alive. Happy New Year.